Hello everyone, it's Rabbi Akiva Males. I hope you're well. I know this wasn't the way any of us had planned to spend this night of Torah learning together. I know this wasn't what Rabbi Wendy planned. I just want to start by saying a Yasher Koach to Rabbi Wendy. He didn't let anything get in his way. He was determined to have this night go forward. And despite the fact this isn't what he or any of us planned, he persisted. So a Yasher Koach to Rabbi Wendy. I wanted to share a very short Dvar Torah with you that's going to relate to Pesach this year. You may have noticed, and I'm sure it's going to be publicized a lot more in the coming days, that Erev Pesach this year, the regular siyum that we're used to seeing and taking place and participating in after davening is going to be very different. Because of the social distancing that we're all trying our best to adhere to, no one is going to be congregating for a minyan on Erev Pesach unless things radically change between now and then, and no one's going to be there live to appreciate a siyum on a Masechet or on any a sizable amount of Torah learning. So what are we going to do? We're going to participate either by phone or we're going to participate by a video hookup with various siyumim that are taking place. And you will find that when anyone discusses why this is okay, invariably the name of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zatzal, will always come up. Rav Auerbach, we know, was a great tzaddik and a posek. He was a massive Talmud Chacham. He lived in Yerushalayim. He just passed away in 1995. He was known for his warm smile, aside from his incredible Torah scholarship, his warm, loving smile, and how he was able to embrace all of Klal Yisrael, something that's very, very difficult to do, and to win love from all of Klal Yisrael. Again, something that's very, very difficult to do. So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he has recorded in a number of places saying this is one siyum, one particular siyum, that someone could participate in that way and feel that simcha in that remote fashion, and that would absolve someone from having to fast. Someone who would have fasted on Erev Pesach, that could absolve them from that. That brings to mind the question, what is Tanis Habechorim all about? The reason why these siyumim take place is to help Habechorim, those who may have had the minhag, the long-standing minhag, custom to fast on Erev Pesach, the day preceding Pesach. This gets them out of fasting by taking part in this simcha, in this great joyous event. The question comes up, what is the purpose of this fast? What was its intent? So I want to share with you something incredible that I saw a few years ago, written by Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's students, based on what he would say over in yeshiva, and apparently he had written this over in a journal or two in his younger years, a very novel explanation, a theory that he had about Tanis Habechorim. Let's jump right in. Rav Shlomo Zalman brings down as follows. There's no official reason that's brought down for Tanis Habechorim, for the fast of the firstborn on Erev Pesach, on the day that immediately precedes Pesach. Most Rishonim and most of our early commentators never even mention this. The few that do say a very cryptic line. They say, Zecher L'neis, it's a memory of the great miracle, Shnitzolu mimakas bechoros, that the Jewish firstborn were saved from the Makas Bechoros, the plague wherein all the Egyptian firstborn died, the Jewish firstborn were saved. That's a very cryptic line they use. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach asks that there are at least 4 solid questions that can be asked on this. And let me go through them with you. They're very quick and they're very logical. 4 solid questions. Number 1, Makas Bechoros happened the night that we all sit down and have our Seder, on Pesach night. That's the night of the 15th of Nisan. So if you want to commemorate the fact that the Jewish Bechorim were saved and were not smitten by that plague, that occurs on the night of the 15th. That being the case, why are they fasting on the 14th, prior to that, prior to the plague? Because one might suggest, well, the 15th is a Yom Tov, well, the 14th is also a Yom Tov. The day of the bringing of the Korban Pesach was the 14th, and that becomes a quasi-Yom Tov of sorts as well. If we're not going to fast on Yom Tov, why on earth would the Bechorim have fasted on the 14th? We should move this one day earlier to the 13th of Nisan, and nobody brings that down. That's question number 1. Question number 2 that Rav Shlomo Zalman asks is that it seems that this fast should only apply to the offspring of the Bechorim that were around in the original episode of Makas Bechoros, meaning those Jewish firstborn that were alive at that time of Egypt, the Exodus from Egypt, Yetzias Mitzrayim. So those Jewish firstborn, they should have a Mesorah, they should have a tradition that their descendants are the ones who need to fast at Tanis Habechorim to remember that nace. Why should every Bechor throughout the history of Klal Yisrael have to fast? What do they have to do with this? Their ancestors were were never at risk. The only Bechorim who were at risk were the Bechorim at that specific Tkufa, that time period. But Bechorim later, unless they're descendants of those Bechorim, why should they fast? What does this have to do with them? Number 3, his third question is that the minhag, the long-standing minhag of Tanis Bechorim is that it only applies to Jewish men who are Bechorim. That's it. If there's a girl in the family who is a Bechorah, it does not apply to her. Even though she's the firstborn, it does not apply to her. But why? We said in the Makas Bechoros, we said it was Ein Bayis Asher Ein Shames. There was no Egyptian home that did not have a casualty. Meaning, even if the firstborn was a girl, she died. Even if the firstborn was not home, whoever was the oldest in the house died. If that's the case, and this is to commemorate the Jews who survived Makas Bechoros, why is the Tanis Bechorim limited to Jewish firstborn males? It should apply just as much to Jewish firstborn females, as well as whoever the oldest person is in the house, because Ein Bayis Asher Ein Shames, there was no house that didn't have a casualty, and therefore we should take that same logic and apply that to Jews who are responsible to fast. And the final question that Rosh Shlomo Zalman had is that if the whole purpose of this fast is to commemorate the fact that Jewish firstborn were saved, why are we commemorating that with a fast? Whenever Klal Yisrael celebrates the fact that we were saved from destruction, saved from doom and gloom, we don't fast, we party. Think about Purim, it was just a few weeks ago. We partied on Purim. Think of Hanukkah, we make a mesiba, we make a celebration. Since when do we commemorate the fact that we were saved from destruction with a fast? What's going on here? So based on these 4 questions, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach wanted to suggest the following novel theory. He wants to suggest that Tanis Bechorim, that Klal Yisrael has this long-standing minhag, long, ancient custom to practice. The reason has nothing to do with what we thought it did. Rather, he suggests as follows, is that Tanis Bechorim is a time where Bechorei Yisrael, the firstborn males of Klal Yisrael, gather to contemplate and to think about what they lost. What does that mean? We all know, Chazal tell us, that in the original scheme of things, the original plan was that the Bechorei Yisrael, the firstborn of Bnei Yisrael, were supposed to be the Kohanim. They were the ones who were going to be leading the Avodah and the Mishkan and then in the Beis HaMikdash. But they lost that. When did they lose that? At the Chet HaEgel, at the sin of the golden calf. That's when that right of being, so to say, the Kohanim, the priests, the representative, the Shluchei Tzibor, the communal representatives engaged in the Avodah and all of the sacred work that would take place in the tabernacle and later in the temple, it was transferred from the Bechorim and it was given to the Kohanim. So Rosh Shlomo Zalman wants to suggest on one day of the year, all the Bechorei Yisrael, they gather to think about what they lost, and really, in a certain sense, to fast about it, and it's a contemplative day, it should be. And he says, why did they pick the 14th of Nisan? What does the 14th of Nisan have to do with this? It could have been any day. Why specifically then? And he suggests as follows. The 14th of Nisan, when the Beis HaMikdash stood, was the most festive day, and it was the day when it became the clearest for all of Klal Yisrael that the Kohanim were the ones running the show in the Beis HaMikdash. Because every member of Klal Yisrael who wants to bring a Korban Pesach, they go to the Beis HaMikdash. And everyone's festive, everyone's there, and everyone sees the Kohanim are the ones running the show. They're shechting, they're doing the avodah. And the Bechorei Yisrael say, that could have been me. That could have been me up there. I could have been in that role, but I lost it because of the Chet HaEgel. If there's one day of the year where Bechorim felt that loss and became contemplative and really started to think about what could have been had their ancestors made a different decision back at the Chet HaEgel, the one day that was most pronounced, he suggests, was Erev Pesach, when all of Bnei Yisrael who wanted to bring a Korban Pesach were in the Beis HaMikdash, they were actively engaged, and they were seeing that the Kohanim were running the show and not the Bechorei Yisrael. That's what Rav Shlomo Zalman suggests. And he says, with that, we answer our 4 questions. Question number 1 is answered. Is that if it happened on the 15th, why is the fast taking place on the 14th? Because again, it has nothing to do with the fact that the Bechorei Yisrael, the Jewish firstborn, were spared. It's a fast about thinking about what we lost, and on no day was that more felt. Was it more profound than on Erev Pesach, when everyone was engaged in a Korban Pesach? Question number 2, it should have, if the whole purpose of this fast is to commemorate what happened to the Zayda back in Mitzrayim, the great-grandfather, so it should have only been on the descendants of them. So that why does that apply to all the Bechorei Yisrael nowadays? Because the Bechorei Yisrael nowadays, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman, still need one day to think about what they lost, that they're not the Kohanim. It applies to every Bechor. Number 3, why, and this is great, why is the minhag of Atanas Bechor only on Jewish firstborn males and not females, and not on the head of the house, when they were the ones who would have also suffered in Makas Bechorim? Jewish firstborn females would have suffered, and the head of the house, whoever was oldest, would have suffered. So why aren't they fasting? The answer is, again, according to Rav Shlomo Zalman, this fast has nothing to do with who was spared, who was saved at Makas Bechoros. It's a fast for the would-be Kohanim to think about what they lost. And who are the would-be Kohanim? The firstborn Jewish males. And the last question, if the whole fast was the fact that they were saved from the doom of Makas Bechoros, they should have been celebrating. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, no, that's not the point of the fast. The point of this fast was to commemorate what was lost, to think about what was lost, and to reflect upon that, and to be a contemplative day, and to be a day where there was some engagement in tshuva. That's what he suggests. And what he ends with saying, and we'll conclude with this, is so beautiful. Rav Shlomo Zalman says, "Uvezeh yesh lahamtik," and with this we can sweeten it, and we can explain one last thing. We are so lenient with this fast. Where else do we say you could get out of a fast by just making a siyum? So he says here, we do. We said you could get out of this fast by making a siyum on a Maseches or on a sizable amount of Torah learning. Ki b'simchas limud Torah, because of the fact that people engage and participate in the happiness of studying Torah, mafigim ha-bechorim es tsar v'hamariru shebalibam. This assuages the Bechorim. This helps them get past the pain and the anguish that they're feeling about all that they lost. Engaged in simchas ha-Torah helps them get past that. Shechein, because what do we say? Gedola Torah yoser mina kahuna. It says in Pirkei Avos that someone who engages in Torah study and masters an area of Torah study, that's even more profound than being a Kohen. So perhaps engaging in Torah, engaging in the study of Torah, that's something which can be a remedy, so to say. Get a Kohen out of feeling, now I'm not feeling so remorseful anymore. I'm not feeling that sense of loss and despair. Now they can get away from that fast, which would have otherwise been a day for contemplation. That might also explain in Rav Shlomo Zalman's theory, getting back to how we began, why this was a fast that he was more lenient with, and felt this is one fast that everybody could participate in, as even if it was by phone or by video, whatever medium they were going to use, because this is a very different fast than all other fasts, and this is a very different siyum. The whole purpose of this siyum is to participate and to feel the joy in another person's Torah learning. And if we've done that, even remotely, over the phone or by video, we have now gladdened our hearts, and those Bechorim who would have been in a state of despair otherwise on this day, they are now glad, and as a result of that, they can eat. I hope everyone has a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, a healthy, can't say that enough, a healthy and a happy Pesach. It should be a wonderful year, and our Chazal, our sages, tell us that B'Nisan Nigalu, that our ancestors were originally redeemed in the month of Nisan. The original Exodus was in the month of Nisan, U'V'Nisan Hasidin Ligalos, and it's in the month of Nisan that we can look forward to our future final redemption. May we all witness that day very soon. Have a good evening, everyone.